What happened to Wallenquist's skin? Why is he considered an even greater evil in Sin City than the Roarks? Does Manute possess supernatural abilities? Why is the yellow bastard's blood so foul, and what horrifying details about his anatomy does that reveal? Why doesn't Kevin feel pain, and what is he truly? The answers to these and other intriguing questions about Frank Miller's Sin City are in this video. Don't forget to subscribe and support the video with your activity. It really means a lot to me. My friends, this video is dedicated to the most striking antagonists of Sin City. It includes both brand new material and the best of what I've covered before, now expanded with new fascinating details that weren't in the previous videos. Enjoy watching! Alaric Wallenquist is the criminal mastermind of Sin City. He's unlike the other villains. He avoids public appearances, never makes threats, and doesn't dirty his hands. He prefers to stay in the shadows, quietly observing and controlling everything. Everything that happens in the alleys, brothels, casinos, and politicians' offices, sooner or later, leads back to him. He's not just the king of Sin City's criminal world, he's the force that keeps the entire structure functioning like a well-organized enterprise. Wallenquist runs a vast organization involved in everything: illegal substances, human trafficking, arms dealing, and contract violence. He commands an entire army of shadow operatives, informants, drivers, mercenaries, assassins, brokers, and many others. Manute, the one we see more often and the one we'll be talking about in this video, is one of his loyal enforcers. Wallenquist himself never does the dirty work, he organizes it. His most prominent appearance is in A Dame to Kill For. There, Ava Lord, the infamous femme fatale, tries to seduce him as she does everyone else, but even she cannot sway this man. These are the scenes where Frank Miller makes it clear that true power in Sin City doesn't belong to those who shoot or threaten, but to those who can wait, stay hidden, and control their emotions. In the comic Hell and Back, Wallenquist appears only briefly, but once again we see his restraint. When one of his subordinates crosses the line, Wallenquist doesn't start a bloody vendetta. He explains that revenge is merely an emotional waste that only leads to loss. In other words, he views evil primarily through the lens of an economic system, because to gain great profit, one must also be ready to bear occasional losses. And for that system to work properly, it must be governed with a cold, calculating mind. Yes, Wallenquist's appearances were very brief, even in A Dame to Kill For, but that was more than enough to understand why he's the most dangerous form of evil in Sin City, far more dangerous than the Roarks themselves.
You know who I am, what I can do.
Even though the Roarks control every vertical of power: politics, law enforcement, religion, and so on. I even came across a quote from Frank Miller saying that Wallenquist represents an evil that cannot be redeemed. The thing is, the Roarks are ruled by their emotions, they live through them, and that's exactly what destroyed the two most powerful Roarks. But Wallenquist isn't like that. He's a systematic, cold, and calculating kind of evil, and that's what makes him so dangerous. Yes, the Roarks may have more influence and more resources, but Wallenquist clearly understands that his pragmatism will grant him a far longer life. He'll simply outlive the Roarks. And if we consider the fate of the most powerful Roarks, that's exactly what happened. Still, it's worth noting that the Roark family is much larger than what we've seen in the films. We know at least one of them serves as the district attorney of Basin City, but that doesn't mean Wallenquist and the Roarks are enemies. Not at all. At least neither the comics nor the films mention any conflict between them. These two forces of the criminal world hold Sin City by different strings. The Roarks rule through law and morality, while Wallenquist rules through money and the streets. That's precisely why Wallenquist has long wanted to seize Old Town. It bothered him deeply that such profitable territory and income were controlled by women. The events of the Big Fat Kill revolve around that very conflict. In short, the Roarks give Wallenquist legitimacy and he gives them money. It's a criminal symbiosis, but all of them are like parasites feeding on the body of Basin City. As with many other characters in Sin City, we know nothing about Wallenquist's past, but the most well-known fan theory connects his origins to the short story Rats from the collection Lost, Lonely, and Lethal. According to this version, a young Wallenquist was once a Nazi hunter, the same man who, in the story, executes an old German war criminal who kept poisoning rats in his apartment. He shoves the ex-executioner's head into a gas oven, ending his life the same way he once ended the lives of others. Some fans believe that this moment marks the beginning of Wallenquist's path, from hunting murderers to becoming a ruthless mafia strategist. Of course, this is just a theory. There's no solid evidence in the canon linking that character to Wallenquist, only a vague visual resemblance. Still, the same theory also offers an explanation for what might have happened to Wallenquist's skin. It suggests that after the ending of Rats, there may have been an off-screen event, a gas leak in the apartment that caused a fire. The panels in the comic show an old gas stove, leaving Wallenquist's skin permanently covered in severe burns. And yes, it's time for us to speculate on this ourselves. What exactly happened to Wallenquist's skin? Is it a congenital genetic condition or the result of trauma? Does the canon say anything about it? Not really. Nowhere is it directly explained why his skin looks the way it does. The only mention describes his face as being marked by heavy scars, burns, or perhaps traces of a skin disease, which again leaves plenty of room for interpretation. But the most important thing to start with is the difference between Wallenquist's appearance in the comics and in the film, and yes, there are differences.
You have limited influence on me, Mrs. Lord.
In the comics, Wallenquist is depicted as a man of colossal proportions. He's taller and broader than anyone else, with a massive body and slow, confident movements. There is no doubt that his strength is monstrous. I believe it rivals that of Marv or even Manute. He looks like someone who could easily throw around a dozen men with his bare hands. Judging by his build, he climbed to the top not only through intellect, but also through a kind of physical power that can't be gained through ordinary training. Most likely, his size is the result of a rare genetic anomaly that affects the muscles, bones, and skin all at once. The main explanation would be a malfunction of the myostatin gene. This protein regulates muscle growth, and when it fails, the body simply doesn't know when to stop. The muscle fibers in such individuals become denser and thicker than normal. At the same time, he probably has an excess of growth hormone, which affects the skeleton. His bones keep thickening even after maturity. His shoulders, ribcage, skull, jaw, and hands all expand. His body weight is likely around 700 pounds, but it's almost entirely muscle and bone. Such a condition inevitably affects the skin. As the muscles and bones continue to grow, the skin stretches, loses elasticity, and over time becomes rough and dense. This could explain its scar-like structure and thickened texture, which in the comics resemble old wounds. Thus, Wallenquist's body in the comics appears to be the result of rare genetic traits that made him incredibly strong. Again, I'm convinced that Wallenquist in the comics possesses unreal strength. However, it's worth noting that the comics portray the scars on Wallenquist's skin quite neutrally without emphasizing their details, which is consistent with Sin City's overall artistic style. So they could just as easily be the result of burns, chemical injuries, old wounds, or even rough medical work. One way or another, in the comics, what stands out most about Wallenquist is his enormous size rather than the condition of his skin. In the film adaptation, it's the opposite. His size is fairly average for a large man, I'd say, while his head becomes the defining feature of his image. Most likely, Wallenquist's skin in the film is the result of several combined factors that together make his appearance so distinctive. First, there are clear signs of congenital or acquired genetic features affecting keratinization or collagen synthesis. This can cause the skin to become thick, dry, and uneven, gradually hardening and losing elasticity, creating a keratinized, scale-like effect. Second, Wallenquist's appearance could also be partially explained by numerous skin graft surgeries performed after past injuries. After all, we can see many scars on his head. His face and skull clearly went through significant trauma. During grafts, different areas of skin can heal unevenly, creating irregular textures. If multiple procedures were done, the surface develops a distinctly rough and layered look. Altogether, this produces the unique texture we see in the film. His skin appears to combine both genetic features and traces of surgical reconstruction. That's just my modest subjective opinion, one that should, of course, be viewed merely as an attempt to dive deeper into the world of the artwork itself.
I've taken a beating before, but never like this.
Manute is one of the most memorable characters in Sin City, a giant with impeccable manners and cold discipline. He's a bodyguard, chauffeur, and executioner all in one, serving those who hold power. At first he works for Damian Lord, then for his wife Ava, and later for Wallenquist, gradually evolving from a simple mercenary into almost Wallenquist's right-hand man. It was Wallenquist who entrusted him with overseeing the failed operation to seize control of Old Town. But an interesting artistic detail is that Manute's loyalty to Wallenquist may not have come merely from seeking new employment. Manute was utterly devoted to Ava Lord, he worshipped her, and shortly before her death, Ava declared her loyalty to Wallenquist's interests. Therefore, Manute may have considered that, with Ava gone, Wallenquist was now his direct superior. In any case, a man like Wallenquist would never rely on someone whose qualities and skills weren't useful to him. Manute's role in both the comics and the films is nearly identical. He's not just a fighter, but the embodiment of control, a man who follows orders with mechanical precision and never asks unnecessary questions. And yes, that's exactly the quality Wallenquist valued most in him. Manute even dresses the part in a strict uniform. He allows himself to show emotion only on rare occasions. Even when resorting to violence, he remains polite, as if considering it a mere formality. Manute appears in the stories A Dame to Kill For, The Big Fat Kill, and briefly in other chapters where his name alone inspires fear. In the films, he was portrayed by two different actors, Michael Clark Duncan and later Dennis Haysbert. As with the previous character, there are differences between Manute's depiction in the source material and in the adaptation. In terms of personality, they are largely the same, but in terms of the character's resilience, the differences are significant. At the end of the comic version of A Dame to Kill For, Miho pins Manute to the ground with their katanas. However, the injuries he sustains are not fatal. Manute's next major appearance is in The Big Fat Kill, but at the end of the film adaptation of A Dame to Kill For, Ava Lord decides to personally get rid of her loyal bodyguard. She shoots Manute, hitting him several times in the torso and vital organs, and yet, as we later learn, Manute survives and recovers completely. Yes, similar injuries were sustained by Hartigan, who also survived, but in Hartigan's case, he was saved by the best medical care in Sin City, paid for by Roark Sr. Later in the video, we'll discuss how the medical technologies available to the Roarks go far beyond conventional understanding. And if Hartigan was saved by Roark resources, then what saved Manute? Script convenience? In part, yes. But there's also something more.
Don't move. You're a fool. The goddess takes no lover.
Actor Dennis Haysbert, who portrayed Manute in the second film, said in an interview that Frank Miller suggested seeing the character as a voodoo follower. Voodoo is not magic, but a religion based on communion with spirits and the forces of nature. Yet within the context of a fictional world, such faith can grant a character almost mystical abilities, incredible endurance, immense resilience, iron will, and extraordinary strength. Manute's strength in the comics is indeed immense. He's nearly equal to Marv in physical power, at least in the film. There, Marv manages to turn the fight in his favor by using a move Manute didn't expect. And Marv's strength, as we've already discussed in a separate video, I'll link it at the end, goes far beyond normal human limits. Even if Manute's strength and durability equal only half of Marv's, he still undoubtedly possesses supernatural capabilities. In the director's cut of The Big Fat Kill, Manute's death is definitive. Miho ruthlessly slices him in half, but according to the theatrical version, the question remains open. And yes, there's a fan theory that Manute's new eye, the one replacing the trophy Marv took from him, isn't artificial at all, but biological. It was supposedly created using the same technology that gave Roark Jr. his new body parts. How? Keep watching this video to find out.
Recognize my voice, Hartigan? Recognize my voice?
Yes, John Hartigan, who had just 1 hour left until retirement on that cursed night, couldn't think about the past 30 years of service, filled with glory, triumph, blood, and tears. He couldn't think about a fat steak waiting for him at home that his wife cooked with love. All his thoughts were occupied with one thing. Somewhere out there is young, defenseless Nancy Callahan in the hands of the maniac, Roark Jr. And the scariest thing for Hartigan right now is being late. Yes, messing with the Roarks is a losing game from the start. But an old man's life for a girl's life is an equal exchange. And Hartigan has always been one of those who clearly understood one thing. Those bastards cranking the meat grinder called Sin City will sooner or later feel what it's like to be the meat. And this is what Hartigan, coming just in time, battling heart issues, makes Roark Jr. go through. He shoots off his left ear, right hand, and his main weapon, his genitals, just moments before his traitorous partner Bob shoots him in the back several times, not allowing Hartigan to finish what he started. I think you remember what happened next. Roark Sr. intends to turn Hartigan's life into hell and slap on him false charges in a fabricated case of violence against Nancy Callahan. That is why he needs Hartigan alive. And at Roark Sr.'s behest, he receives first-class medical care. There is one important detail in these scenes. The level of medical equipment in Hartigan's room stands out significantly from everything we see in Sin City, as if this is something advanced for Sin City. In fact, it is true. This means that if Roark provided such medical equipment for Hartigan, then the level of medical care for his son, whom Hartigan crippled, must be simply extraordinary. And that's also true. But first things first, 8 years later, Hartigan wakes up once again on the cursed floor of a cursed cage. But this time he was about to awaken to a horrific stench, like a piece of beef that had been left in the backseat of a pickup truck for several weeks in the summer heat. A stench emanating from the man sitting next to him, who resembled a cold-blooded reptile by his posture and coat, and from certain angles he even resembled an extraterrestrial humanoid. But neither reptiles nor humanoids stink like that. This is how Yellow Bastard smells. Yes, looking at this yellow skin, bald head, deformed ears and nose, Hartigan still didn't recognize Roark Jr. and this man, who, thanks to Hartigan, had completed his transformation into a full-fledged freak in every sense. This is how Roark Jr.'s father will describe him. Perhaps Hartigan would have recognized Roark Jr.
Practically knocked my head off, the bastard.
But over the past 8 years, he had become much better at shooting and much better at fighting. Yes, the Roarks tricked Hartigan into leading them to the one who had been sending him letters every week for 8 years. This person turns out to be grown-up Nancy Callahan. It was too late when Hartigan realized this. During the chase, Hartigan manages to shoot Yellow Bastard, who proves to be quite resilient despite significant blood loss. And here, Hartigan once again experiences Yellow Bastard's awful smell. And we understand that the main source of the smell in Yellow's body is his blood itself. The reason for that will become more clear later. Well, shortly after, Yellow catches Hartigan off guard once again with a strong blow, this time in a motel. In this part of the film, Yellow reveals to Hartigan that he's Roark Jr., and he does whatever he wants whenever he wants. Moreover, his father spent a fortune hiring the best specialists in the world to regrow, yes, regrow, the parts of his body that Hartigan shot off. It's worth mentioning that both in the comic, source material, and in the film, Bastard specifically mentions that his new body parts were grown, referring specifically to his genitals. It is not directly stated whether his hand and ear were also grown. However, based on what we'll discuss next, they were also grown. Moreover, all these parts were not grown in a test tube to then be sewn on to Roark Jr. They were all grown directly on Jr. himself. Two things indicate this. First, if we refer to the comic, Jr. specifies that his father, Senator Roark, hired gene therapy experts for his restoration. Roark Jr. calls them genetic wizards. This helps us understand that innovative genetic advancements played a key role in his restoration. Of course, this came with side effects. Additionally, the deformation of his ears and nose supports the idea that the new body parts were grown directly on Jr. These parts continued to grow until new ones were formed to replace those that had been shot off earlier. This is one of the main side effects of Roark Jr.'s restoration, which significantly affected his appearance. After all, ears and nose grow throughout a person's life, and in Roark Jr.'s case, they grow several times faster due to the influence of gene therapy aimed at restoring individual body parts. But of course, the side effects of tissue affected not just his ears and nose. His deformed skull is also quite noticeable. For bioengineering specialists, the main task was not to initiate the growth of the body parts that were shot off, but rather to block the growth of other tissues. They managed to do this to some extent. Yes, to some extent. For this, they had to locally kill, using chemical agents, the cells of the tissues, the unwanted growth of which they needed to slow down. And based on what we'll discuss further, they did this right up until his death. This is exactly the cause of Yellow Bastard blood's awful smell. It is the smell of decay, of all the dead cells, the growth of which needed to be prevented.
His blood smells even worse than he does. Jesus. And it's all over the place.
This also is a possible explanation for Yellow Bastard's yellowness. However, regarding his yellowness, I see two viable theories. The first, most obvious one, is an excess bilirubin pigment in his blood. This is what causes an illness known as jaundice. A common cause of elevated bilirubin levels in the blood is the rapid breakdown of erythrocytes. This can be caused by chemical therapy, which in Roark Jr.'s case was aimed at preventing side effects from restoration. Of course, the therapy with chemicals and genetic changes also led to side effects such as localized fat deposits and baldness. However, the jaundice option doesn't quite fit Roark Jr., as in this case, yellow tint typically affects not only the skin, sometimes even the blood, but also the sclera of the eyes, which Jr. does not have. I think a more realistic option is what's known as false jaundice, when yellowness can be caused by an increased level of carotene pigment. According to open sources, it can be caused not only by consuming certain foods, but also by using specific medications. For example, those having anti-infective action, and Roark Jr. requires such medication on a regular basis due to the constant decay processes in his body, and I believe this is the reason why Yellow Bastard is yellow. For sure, all conclusions regarding the physiology of the Yellow Bastard are merely my subjective opinion, but why not? And yes, it's hard to even call this all semi-scientific or semi-medical. With such regular processes of decay in his body, Roark Jr. simply could not live. But don't forget that according to the author's design, Sin City is a place where supernatural beings exist.
He made me watch. He made me watch!
Kevin. Let's first recall the essence of the story arc, The Hard Goodbye, where Kevin appears as the main bastard antagonist. Not everyone remembers it, and it's impossible to move forward without that context. Marv wakes up in a filthy motel in a rotten part of the city to find his companion Goldie dead. Although there are no visible signs of violence, Marv is certain she was murdered, and whoever did it is a born killer, someone capable of slipping past Marv unnoticed even while he was asleep and dead drunk. Soon the cops show up, confirming his suspicion that the case has already been fabricated and he is the prime suspect in Goldie's death. From there, Marv does what he does best, carving his way through bodies while piecing together the puzzle. The trail leads him to the Roark family farm, a cursed place where people die wrong deaths. Their fate brings him face to face with that same silent, swift, born killer, Kevin, who temporarily blinds and knocks Marv out. Marv regains consciousness in the farm's basement and discovers that Kevin is a cannibal who slowly eats parts of his victims right in front of them until only their heads remain, which he keeps as trophies. His victims are mostly prostitutes. Marv escapes the farm, meets Goldie's twin sister Wendy, and with her help prepares an ambush for Kevin. Kevin is captured and Marv exacts brutal retribution, dismembering him. Yet Kevin's death leaves Marv unsatisfied. Kevin becomes the greatest contradiction of his life. He didn't scream, didn't make a sound, and kept staring at Marv, even as the wolf devoured him alive and even as Marv sawed off his head. But Marv takes his revenge on Kevin's powerful patron, Cardinal Patrick Roark. Roark's death is excruciating. Before his execution, Roark confesses that Kevin came to him as a child, full of guilt and remorse, apparently over his first acts of cannibalism. Roark tried to guide the boy, but Kevin swore that with each feast he was filled with pure light, an all-embracing love for all living things. In those moments, he said he touched God, for he didn't consume flesh, he consumed souls. Kevin also possessed a truly angelic voice, heard only by Roark, and with every prostitute he devoured, that voice which brought Roark to ecstasy became deeper and richer. But that wasn't enough for Patrick Roark, and like his protege, he too became addicted to cannibalism. Marv in turn became their scapegoat, a convenient target to pin the murders of the missing and eaten girls on, including Goldie herself. That is the essence of the Hard Goodbye storyline.
Oh my God, you monster, you demon.
And again, things aren't as simple as they might seem at first glance. First, from Frank Miller's own comments, we already know that Kevin is a supernatural being representing the dark forces within the Sin City universe. Whatever higher powers Kevin serves, it is not God, because in Sin City, there is no God. Second, the comic includes another important detail confirming Kevin's supernatural nature, one that's easy to overlook and that was downplayed in the film adaptation. Roark tells Marv that Kevin came to him as a boy, but the comic clarifies that they met when Patrick Roark was still a simple priest, meaning he was relatively young. This implies that the age gap between them may not be that large, perhaps 10 or 15 years. Therefore, by the time of the hard goodbye, Kevin could be 50, 60, or even 70 years old. It's difficult to determine precisely since we don't know Patrick Roark's exact age. Meanwhile, in the film adaptation, Kevin looks about 20 and in the comic, closer to 30. In the comic, Kevin appears slightly aged. The most plausible assumption about Kevin's nature is that he is a demon, one engaged in the sweetest kind of work for a demon, corrupting the soul of a priest. Kevin is not possessed by a demon, he is the demon. The one possessed is Patrick Henry Roark. We know that Patrick Roark once chose to serve God, although he could have easily become president. So why did he choose the path of clergy? On the surface, the answer seems clear. Religion can be a powerful tool of political influence, something that has always served the Roark family's interests. Cardinal Roark became the most powerful man in the state, effortlessly pushing his sadistic brother into the Senate. But what if Patrick Roark initially wanted to take a different path, one separate from his family's long legacy of corruption and human suffering? And what if that's why a demon appeared beside him, one who couldn't allow it, who slowly twisted his soul to make him just like his kin? In the comic, when Marv brings Roark Kevin's severed head, Roark clings to it as if Kevin were the only thing he ever truly valued. Indeed, unlike the rest of his family, Patrick Roark seems less interested in material wealth. Just look at the simplicity of his quarters. From Sin City's lore, we also know that Kevin, being an efficient killer, helped strengthen the Roark family's influence. In other words, Kevin is a cornerstone character of Sin City, the one responsible for one of the greatest evils in its universe, the Roark family's power and absolute impunity.
Kevin! All I've got is a face and a name.
And the most crucial details revealing Kevin's true nature appear in the scenes where Marv is imprisoned on the farm, moments that are often overlooked. In the basement, Marv meets his old acquaintance Lucille, who also crossed the rocks. She tells Marv that Kevin forced her to watch as he gnawed the meat off her fingers, after first roasting her hand like a steak. Lucille begins to scream in terror, and at that moment we see Kevin standing outside. Only his slightly upturned eyes betray his true emotion. In that instant, Kevin isn't just in ecstasy, he is feeding. He feeds on Lucille's screams. Specifically, he feeds on her terror and fear. It's fear itself that sustains this demon, the emotion that gives him power. Thus, Kevin's slow consumption of his victims before their very eyes isn't an end in itself, it's a means to an end, a perverse ritual designed to extract as much rich terror as possible. What truly interests Kevin is the emotional suffering of his captives. The comic implies that his victims feel little physical pain. Lucille woke up in the kitchen already without a hand, and the amputation had been done skillfully, far more delicately than in the film. This makes sense since Kevin wants his victims to stay alive as long as possible. The longer they live, the more he can gradually dissect their bodies, and the more fear they can provide him. What horror could compare to that of a victim who, after losing all limbs and most of her flesh, remains conscious and watches the cannibal stand Thor 20th feast? And if in these scenes Kevin is feeding, in others he displays curiosity. Curiosity toward Marv. Roark chose Marv as the perfect scapegoat for the deaths of 6 girls and Goldie, but Kevin, the one truly pulling the strings, selected Marv for a completely different reason. Let's briefly return to how it all began, to how Marv met Goldie. From Roark's confession, we learn that Goldie had begun to suspect him and Kevin of the girl's disappearances. When they started haunting her, she chose Marv as her protector, strong, silent, and unquestioning. But why? At that time, Goldie and her sister Wendy ruled Old Town, the most secure area in Basin City, one that would take an army to breach. They even had their own natural-born supernatural killer on their side, so why turn to Marv? The answer is that Marv wasn't for her, he was for Kevin. Their meeting was part of Kevin's design, a setup meant to lead Marv straight to his farm. Marv's entire journey in the hard goodbye was orchestrated by Kevin, and Goldie approached Marv because she was already under Kevin's control, like a puppet. And when she was no longer useful, Kevin simply drained her life force, which by that point already belonged to him. That's why Goldie's body bears no signs of violent death.
And that cold thing happens to my stomach, and I realize Goldie's dead.
So why did Kevin need Marv? Marv was essential for Kevin's final ritual, the ritual of consuming himself. Kevin chose Marv because they share many similarities. We know that Marv loves inflicting gruesome pain on his enemies, making them scream and drown in terror. That same terror Kevin feeds on. That's exactly what he promised Goldie, to show them something that would make hell seem like paradise. And of course, like Kevin, Marv enjoys dismembering his enemies. He did it to that guy, forcing him to look at his own severed parts until he talked, and he did it to Kevin himself. Judging by Marv's calm preparation, we can tell this wasn't his first time. Now you might argue that Kevin's final ritual did not go as planned, since he never screamed or showed fear like his victims did. But that's not true. In both the film and the comic, there are moments when Kevin's signature smirk fades for a brief instant. In the comic, it happens at the most logical point, when the beast begins devouring him alive. For a supposedly emotionless being, that is the manifestation of true fear and terror of what's happening. No matter what Kevin truly is, he's still bound by the limits of his human shell and capable of feeling fear, as well as curiosity. Yes, Kevin can experience emotions, he is responsive to them, and only to them. This answers the question of why Kevin doesn't feel physical pain. Some argue that Kevin feels pain but simply ignores it. That's not the case. Kevin doesn't know what physical pain is. His physical form is burdened only by emotional perception, a very specific kind of emotional sensitivity, let's say. You could again argue that Kevin's twisted ritual did not go as planned, since Marv didn't feel his fear, which was always the key element in Kevin's interaction with his victims. But Marv isn't smart enough to understand the whole picture. He wasn't meant to play the main role in this ritual. There was someone else, someone who wasn't on that farm by chance, someone who had been there for years, someone who doesn't need to hear screams to know and feel that you are experiencing pure terror. Of course, I'm talking about Kevin's wolf, the one he had trained for years to feed on human flesh, the one who played the central role in Kevin's final ritual, freeing him from his physical shell and allowing him to become something greater, something more powerful, something more united with the dark forces he worshipped. Which only means one thing: evil has no intention of leaving these lands. Here's another one of my theories about the true nature of Kevin and the legendary Sin City. Let me know what you think about it in the comments, and share your thoughts on the other characters too. I hope today you've learned a bit more about the dark world of Sin City. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and support the channel with your activity. It really means a lot to me. See you next time.